My ex-husband currently requires a caregiver to help him with basic human functions after his recent hospitalization, and our kids are calling me a selfish jerk for not going over and providing for him, even though I have my own life now. Posted by /visible_yesterday_62. I, 56F, have been married to my wife Angela, 56F, for a year, and we're planning our first anniversary celebration with a trip overseas. I was very excited to spend this time with my wife, but unfortunately my ex-husband Dan's, 58M, recent hospitalization is putting a damper on my plans. Backstory: I met Dan in college and we got married shortly after graduating when we found out that I was pregnant. At the time it felt like the right thing to do, but looking back it was a bad idea. I resented having to put my career aspirations on hold in order to be the full-time caregiver, and Dan resented having to be the main financial provider. However, this did not stop him from constantly bringing it up whenever I asked him to help with the kids or the home. He also never defended me when his mother would stop by, unannounced, and the household wasn't up to the Queen's standard. I felt so exhausted and trapped, and if it weren't for my kids Junior, 34, Sarah, 32F, Michelle, 29F, and Mike, 29M, I would have left years ago. Unfortunately, Dan did not have the same values as me and blindsided me with divorce papers. It was a rough process, but after the first year of our divorce being finalized, I got my groove back, and within the next 4 years I was able to get a nice apartment and good career. Present day: a couple of weeks ago Dan was rushed to the hospital, and while the doctors were able to save him, his health took a turn for the worse. His wife is now essentially working to provide for their kids, while her parents watch them to save on daycare. I learned all of this through my children, as I do not care to have any direct contact with Dan, but almost every time I talk to them they always bring up how stressed and tired they are over having to look after their father. I thought I was just being a sympathetic ear, but a couple of days ago my children came together to confront me about my lack of willingness to offer assistance to their father, and as their mother I should want to care for him to make their own lives easier. My children know that while I have a full-time job I can make up my own hours, and they want me to come into his house at least twice a week to make sure he's clean and fed, or pay for a nurse to come do it. I refused, stating that Dan and I have been divorced for years and that their stepmom can handle that. That's when they told me that she didn't care about their dad like they do and is most likely hoping for him to pass so she can collect on his insurance policy as the legal wife. My daughter Sarah then began to cry and asked me if I cared whether or not she had a dad anymore, while Junior and Mike thought that I was being bitter. Michelle asked me to put them first and that I can reschedule my anniversary trip with Angela. My former in-laws are also calling me to say that I need to do this and that I'd be a horrible mom. Am I a jerk? Commenter: NTA. If I were to guess, I'd say your in-laws are pressuring your kids, saying that their father's wife doesn't care for him and whatnot. What actual evidence your children have that his wife isn't caring for him properly? Maybe her care isn't up to the Queen's standards. Oop, from what I am told, she moved him from out of their shared bed, doesn't help him with his medication, takes the food to his room but won't cut it up into small pieces so it's easier for him to eat, and leaves it on the other side of the room to motivate him to move. She doesn't take him to his appointments, and unless my children, usually my daughters, come by, he's not kept very clean. My children say that Dan has limited mobility and can't verbally communicate like he once did at the moment, but the doctors are hoping that he'll be able to regain most of his functions if they stick to the plan. The only thing I have to go on is what my children are telling me that they've personally witnessed. Update 1. 2.5 months later. I forgot about the password to this account and my stepdaughter showed me what to do, and once I accessed this I saw that I got a few messages from people asking for an update, so I thought I'd share. First, a few people seem to be confused, so let me be clear. I am a woman who is married to another woman. My own parents passed away years ago, so their opinion is irrelevant. My wife and I both have children from previous relationships, but we didn't meet until after our children were adults, so my wife and I are the only ones who have lived together. Now onto what almost everyone else cares about the most. I went on cruise. It was great, and my wife and I had a really great time. My children were predictably unhappy, and I'm sure that my temporary blocking of them didn't make it better. Most of my children kept calling and telling me that I was a selfish and awful woman for choosing to go on a vacation instead of being there for the family, but, like many have stated, I reminded them that their father divorced me and therefore my obligations to him ended. If it were any of them that had a medical need I would cancel without question, but I would not for their father. I thought I could leave it at that, but because they kept calling and texting the first 3 days of the trip, and that's when I decided to block. Unfortunately, my ex's health took a turn for the worse and he had to go back to the hospital, and his lack of proper care triggered an investigation. I didn't know any of this until I unblocked my kids the day I got back, and some of them blamed me. I've come to the conclusion that they're all just mad at the situation and I'm a convenient villain. I've accepted this because I can understand the fear and anger of facing the idea of losing a parent that you love. I just hope that one day we can all sit down with a family therapist and mediate the situation. However, this did start to trigger my past tendencies of sacrificing my own happiness and well-being for my children, but my wife, therapist, and even a small piece of my inner self had to remind me that my children are adults and that my ex isn't my responsibility. I try to reach out, and so far most of my children aren't talking to me and have made it very clear that I will not be able to see my grandchildren as a punishment. It's sad, and I'm still wrestling with the guilt and doubt, but my wife and stepchildren are being very supportive, while my other family is a mix and most of my friends are neutral. Update 2. 4 months later. I hope everyone reading this had a wonderful holiday and will have a great new year. For anyone who has been following my drama-filled and emotionally taxing life, I have another update for anyone who cares. This year it was my wife and I's turn to host, and since this past November was rough for us and her side of the family, we decided to go all out with a bigger tree, decorations, planned out activities and meals, etc. Also, as the adults, we decide to do a secret gift giver where we pull names out of a hat. This year I got my stepdaughter Megan, 24, a sweater that I made by hand, but it was terrible, so I decided to make it a gag gift with a gift card to something she actually liked. On the actual day of, my wife and I woke up, had our breakfast, gave each other our spouse gift, and then got ready for everyone else. It was Megan, Miranda, 34F, Miranda's husband, Jack, 34M, the grandkids, 8 and 5, and a couple others. None of the guests were my children with their families. It was sad but not unexpected, and I think people could sense that because kids were extra affectionate with me. We played board games, ate, did crafts, talked, watched movies, and opened gifts. It was nice. When there was a moment, Miranda pulled me off to the side and asked me to adopt her. I don't want to go into the details, but Miranda's father was never active in her life and hasn't spoken to him in about 3 years. She said that with the coming year, if something were to happen, she wouldn't want a man she barely knows to have the power to make medical decisions for her if Jack or my wife are unable to, and she and Jack know that if anything were to happen, I wouldn't let my wife raise the grandkids alone. This had taken me by complete surprise, and I cried while graciously accepting, and then we made the announcement. We're going to start the legal process in a week, but the kids have already switched to calling me a grandma type of name. We took and posted pictures, and since I knew I was blocked, I didn't expect my children to see, but apparently they did. They're all upset with me and unblocked me just to let them know. My children feel that it's weird to do an adult adoption, that it's disrespectful to announce it on social media, and how hurtful it is that I made Megan a sweater but never made a thing for them. I stopped crocheting when my grandma, the one who taught me, passed away when I was a teen, and I just never had the spare time when my children were kids. I tried to call to explain, but I was blocked again. However, Dill, Junior's wife, sent me a message with some info. My children are mad that I got Miranda's kids presents but not my real grandkids. They think I'm replacing them all with my wife's family, that I'm selfish, and how they can't believe that I never once tried to reach out to them to see the grandkids. I wanted to reach out, but I thought it would be less harmful for me and them if I didn't force contact. Update 3. 5.5 months later, yes. The adoption was finalized. Since Miranda is over 18, the adoption went a lot quicker than had she been a minor, despite her father's ironic objections to it. All of my kids with my ex-husband recently decided to cut me out of their lives as I refused to care for their father. I refused on the basis that he and I divorced over 10 years ago, and they feel like I should help take care of him as a favor to them. I've stuck by my decision and chose to go on a cruise with my wife instead of caring for their dad, and they haven't spoken to me directly since. Right now, the only way I'd be able to see my children or grandchildren would be if I physically went to their house and forced my way in. But I don't want to be that person. I'll admit it hasn't been easy and I miss them, but I, my wife, and therapists all agree that if I give in, then I'm just showing that I'll cave to their demands every time, as they've made it very clear it's either I care for their father nearly every day or nothing, and I don't want to do that. Especially since my ex-husband and I didn't divorce on good terms. Recently, my eldest son's wife, Kate, 34F, reached out to me and said that she had an emergency, asked if I wanted to see my grandchildren Emma, 9F, and Kyle, 6 meters, and I obviously agreed. At the time, I was under the impression that my son was aware, and since I was still blocked, I didn't think to reach out and check with him. Kate dropped the kids off and I had nice time with the kids. Kate came back a few hours later and asked me if I could watch the kids again, and when I asked about how my son felt, she told me that while he was still angry, he was fine, and to just contact her if there were any problems. Unfortunately, Kate was lying, and I found out about this when my son came to my house furious. Apparently, Kate and him have been having problems since November, and she started looking for lawyers after my son told her to quit her part-time job, stop going to school online, and be a SOM, while also working on baby number 3. Kate stated that my son has been doing things to sabotage her, and I'm sad to say that some of the things she has said tracks with both my son. His father was the same. My son stopped payment for daycare. Kate's nearest relative lives about an hour away, and any friend that she would trust to look after her kids, and were willing, are also friends with my son and refused to get involved. I was not happy at being lied to, but I can't find myself to be too angry because I got to see 2 of my grandkids. I admit that it's very selfish, but I agree to keep taking the kids for her in exchange that she not lie to me, and understand that if my son comes for the kids I can't/won't keep them from him. I've also agreed to pay for the summer daycare program for the kids so they have something fun to do, and my son is predictably not happy with me. My kids have unblocked me, but only to say that I'm a traitor and how terrible of a person I am. It hurts, but my wife feels that providing a safe and fun place for the grandkids comes first, so I have to ask Ada? Edit for clarity, since more than one person brought up a good point, I just wanted to be clear. When I found out that Kate was initially lying, I didn't just take what she said as her reasonings as the whole truth. I did ask my son, and he either admitted it or didn't deny the accusation. Kate also showed me text messages, both in the form of screenshots and just handing me her phone. My son is also tragically displaying a lot of the same behaviors as my ex. Also, my ex does have a wife, and from when I last spoke to my children about, they said that she wasn't doing a good job, although I haven't spoken to her directly because I don't feel the need, and I also think that that's being too nosy. For more details, my ex and my kids wanting me to take care of him, I believe you can go to my profile and see the post I made about it months ago on another forum. Update 4, Happy Holidays. I made this post a while ago, and because I still get update requests, I decided to post an update. To get to the main points, over the summer I paid for my son's children to go to summer camp during the day so Kate would have some free time to get her affairs in order, and offered to look after them. My son, however, went to the camp and told the people there that he didn't consent to the kids being there, so their spots were taken. My grandchildren really upset because it was a nice camp, and it had a lot of fun activities for them to do. My son basically just didn't give a crap because his goal was to essentially use them to keep Kate at home. He also threatened to call the cops if they ever went to my place, so Kate essentially just left the kids with my son and told him to figure out what to do with them, and she made sure to let the kids know that my son was the reason why they couldn't go to the camp. When they met with the lawyers, my son tried to claim abandonment on Kate's part, but she showed proof that my son interfered with my grandchildren's activities while offering no alternative. While the divorce was going on, Kate got my son to agree, in writing, that he would allow them to have summer activities, and using my own wife's connections, my grandchildren were able to get into another summer program for the last month of summer, and they had a nice time. Kate has her own place and a new and better paying job, and she has allowed me to FaceTime and see my grandchildren from time to time, and it was nice. My children have now completely unblocked, but I had to block them because they would only call to berate and harass me, and even started to cause trouble for my wife and I'd respective jobs. We ended up having to send an official legal notice to get them to stop. It's also draining and upsetting, but my wife and stepchildren are really getting me through all of this. It's not perfect, but I'm happier now than I was while married to my ex-husband. Also, I heard through Kate that while the worst part of my ex's health issues are over, he's now permanently in a less than ideal state. He was also secretly spending thousands of dollars on accounts, which is one of the reasons why his current wife was so upset, and that it was actually one of my daughters who called adult social services to file a complaint. The investigation ended without any fault being found with my ex's wife, and that my ex was just simply refusing to put in the work to get better.